Hello. In this video I would like to talk about how JSON can easily be used to save data between game sessions. So what is JSON? JSON is basically a dictionary containing keys and values. Here's an example where we can store what items the player has in their inventory and the status of things that can be done in the game. Let's say this is our game, and in our game we can do a few things like turning on and off a light, open or close a door, and eat a cake. The status of these events can be stored inside of a JSON file. We load that JSON file into an object inside Unity, and once that's done, we can access the data inside. If the player is playing the game for the first time, we need to load our default JSON file. In this game, the lights are on by default when the player plays the game for the first time. The player can now interact with the game, for example, open a door or eat a cake. We then update our data object with these changes. Now, either from an autosave functionality or a player's choice to save the game themselves, we create a new JSON file with these changes. The player can now exit the game, and when they choose to play again, we can override the first step and basically load the game as it were when they last played. In this video, we will look at how to get data and set data with JSON, and also how to create a new JSON file for a saved game. I am using litJson. If you want to follow my example, you need to download litJson file and include it into your project. You can find it here at litjson.net. It's basically a library that we use to convert text to JSON or JSON to text. Once downloaded, just add it to your project. I added it to the script folders in assets. So let's talk about the code. I'm coding in C#. I'll first explain the broad overview and then go into details. First off, I'm using Unity Engine, litJson and System.io. I named my script Data Manager, and it will be driving from mono behavior. Here are two variables, a public string that we will use to decide the name for our saved file, and a JSON data object that we will use to load our JSON text into. From the start function, we can trigger our script to load the JSON, which we do from load JSON from file function, which will get the JSON from a text file and put it into a JSON data object. I will refer to that object as data throughout the video. Then we have get data, and we have set data, and of course save player progress. Let's start with the load JSON from file. I have added my default JSON file to the resource folder. Then I use resource.load to retrieve it. The .text is important. That will convert the JSON to a string. This function will return JSON data. So I use the JSON mapper to convert the string into JSON data and then return it. So we now have our data ready, and we can get data from it, and we can set data to it. Let's first cover how to get data. So here's our JSON file. In this case, the data we are interested in is getting the status of an event. Let's get the status from level 1 and see if the door is open or not. I use the number 0 for false or 1 for true, as opposed to a boolean true and false. But you can use floats, integer, booleans and strings as well. To get the value, we use square brackets and then we specify a path. In this case, it would be level 1 and door open. That gives us 0 as a result. And this is how we would write it in code. We just need to make sure that we cast or retrieve data to the desired data type, in this case an integer. Otherwise we will get errors. Set data. The player changed something in the game and we want to track that change. I will use the same example, so let's say the player opens the door and we want to change that 0 for a 1. It's really that simple. We will specify the location of the value we want to change, again level 1, open door, and make it equal value 1. To save out our new JSON to disk, we first need to specify a path for our file to live. I'll save this into a string variable, and I'll use the application persistent data path, which means that this path will be the same at all times and therefore a reliable location to store a new file. And then all we have to do is to give that file a name. And if you now wonder where this new file will end up, you can always debug.log that path, and Unity will let you know in the console where it will be saving it. We then convert our JSON data object to a string and save it out as a new JSON text file. Let's just recap real quick and test this out and see if it works. I'll demonstrate this in the start function. First, we load that text file into a JSON object inside Unity and store it in a variable called data. Now we can get information from that data by specifying a location inside that data object. And we can now also use set to change the values inside. These two debug calls will show us that the same location in our data objects has two different values, one before we set and one after. Now inside Unity, all we have to do is to create an empty game object, drag and drop our data manager onto it, and then change a name for our save game file. And that is it. I hope you found this useful. I use this all the time. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and if you would like to subscribe, that would be great too. Cool. See you next time. Bye.